In Ukraine, a major shakeup at the very top of the government has triggered political shockwaves and have raised fresh questions about Kyiv's negotiating posture with the U.S. President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced a resignation of his chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, a figure long seen as president's closest confidant and the country's lead negotiator in talks with Washington. The decision came just hours after anti-corruption investigators conducted search of Yermak's residence. In his nightly address, Zelensky said he was resetting the presidential office, stressing that Russia was waiting for Ukraine to falter during its delicate peace negotiations. Yermak's name was absent from the new list of Ukrainian officials who will be taking part in the next round of talks with the U.S. Amid this political turbulence, Kyiv once again came under fire early on Saturday. Loud explosions have been rocked capital as Russia launched a fresh drone attack. According to the city's military administration, at least one person was killed, 7 were injured, and a residential building, along with several vehicles, were damaged. Despite the escalating attacks, Zelensky says Ukraine is preparing for upcoming negotiations with the U.S. aimed at securing dignified peace with Russia. He emphasized that passing the 2026 national budget remains critical, ensuring Ukraine's defense capabilities and preserving financial stability.
Now we are preparing for a meeting with the American side to discuss the steps that need to be taken to ensure that peace is truly achieved, and that it is a dignified peace. And when all attention is focused on diplomacy and defense in war, internal strength is needed. Internal strength is the foundation of our external unity and our relations with the world.
Зовнішньої єдності і наших відносин зі світом.
Sources say a Ukrainian delegation is set to travel to the U.S. this weekend, and talks may take place in Florida as Washington pushes forward with its own proposal for ending the war. Now, in a related development, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is expected to skip next week's NATO's foreign ministers meeting, a highly unusual absence, especially as allies are set to discuss American diplomacy on Ukraine. While Rubio stays away from Brussels, Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff is expected in Moscow for discussions linked to the diplomatic process. In Europe, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has criticized Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban for meeting Russia's President Putin without a European mandate.
We have been aware of Viktor Orban's position for years. This is not his first trip to Moscow either. He already made a trip to Moscow in July last year, immediately after taking over the presidency of the European Council. That visit was not only unsuccessful. A few days after this visit, the Russian army launched some of its most violent attacks against civilian infrastructure and civilian targets in Ukraine. But he is acting without a European mandate, and he is doing so without consulting us.
Orban's 14th visit to Moscow comes despite a series of EU sanctions on Russia and Europe's shift away from Russian energy. He has repeatedly questioned Western military aid for Kyiv, straining EU unity. In Warsaw, Polish security forces are stepping up vigilance and patrolling tracks as part of Operation Horizon, launched earlier this month to protect critical infrastructure. The move follows a string of suspicious incidents that Polish authorities say bear the hallmarks of Russian sabotage attempts. And for more on this, we were earlier joined by Peter Kuznick. He's a professor of history and director of the Nuclear Studies Institute at American University. Now here's what he had said.
At a time when much of Ukraine only has energy, electricity for a few hours a day, people are just getting fed up. And the question then, we've got this peace proposal, and now Yermak, who is not only chief of staff and top negotiator, but the second most powerful man in Ukraine, is forced to resign after the anti-corruption units investigate his apartment. You know, this is just too much. And so while countries are hesitant to keep giving military aid, because the narrative is that Ukraine is losing on the battlefield, and they're hesitant to keep giving financial aid when you see this massive corruption, Ukraine is in a very, very weak position now in these negotiations. It's sad to watch, but if it brings an end to the fighting, maybe it's worth it.